You have
Help
to
me!
go.
I can't
Now.
move.
I can't
Sadie
move.
whispered the words
I'll
into the
carry you.
dark, her voice cracking against the filthy walls of the alley. Her wheelchair lay sideways on the broken concrete, one wheel still spinning slowly in the thin evening air. Her legs were useless, her arms were pinned beneath her own weight, and three shadows were closing in. The tallest one crouched down to her level. Shane Prescott. She knew his face before he opened his mouth. Everyone in Riverside knew Shane Prescott. Everyone pretended they didn't. He grabbed her chin, his fingers digging into the soft flesh of her cheeks. His grip was cold and deliberate, calculated to remind her that she was small and he was not. You saw what you shouldn't have seen, sweetheart. Now we got a problem to fix. Sadie's scream died somewhere deep in her throat. She tried to pull away, tried to twist her face free, but his hand only tightened. His two friends stood behind him like guard dogs, their faces hidden in the shadows, their silence more threatening than any words they could have spoken. I didn't see anything, Sadie managed. Her voice shook. Every syllable trembled like a leaf in a storm. I don't know what you're talking about. Shane laughed. It was a short, sharp sound, a sound that had no humor in it at all. Don't insult my intelligence, he squeezed harder. Sadie felt the bruise forming in real time, felt the pressure against her jawbone, felt the tears running hot and fast down her cheeks and pooling against his fingers. Do you know who my uncle is? The sheriff, Sadie whispered. That's right, the sheriff, which means I can do whatever I want in this town. And nobody is going to believe a word you say. Please, the word came out broken, barely a word at all. Please, I won't tell anyone. You're damn right you won't. Shane nodded to one of his friends. The man picked up Sadie's wheelchair and hurled it down the alley. The crash of metal against concrete echoed off the brick walls like a gunshot. Sadie flinched. Her only way of moving through the world, her legs, her freedom, lay crumpled 20 feet away in the filth. Here's what's going to happen, Shane said. His face was inches from hers. She could smell cigarettes and something chemical on his breath. You're going to forget what you saw today. You're going to go about your pathetic little life. And if I ever hear that you opened in your mouth, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Help me. Sadie whimpered. Her voice was barely audible now. I can't move. Shane stood up and brushed off his jeans like she was dirt he'd accidentally knelt in. That's the point, sweetheart. The three men laughed. Sadie closed her eyes and waited for whatever came next. She prayed it would be quick. She prayed it wouldn't hurt more than it already did. She prayed for something she couldn't name, some impossible rescue that had no business showing up in a filthy alley behind a library in a town that had forgotten her. Then she heard it. The rumble started low. Somewhere at the mouth of the alley building, like distant thunder rolling across the hills. Not weather, not traffic. An engine, a motorcycle engine, getting closer, getting louder, filling the alley with a sound that vibrated in Sadie's chest and rattled the loose bricks in the walls. Shane's head snapped toward the alley entrance. His smile faltered. The Harley appeared like something conjured from a fever dream, chrome and black steel gleaming in the last of the afternoon light. The man riding it was massive, 6'4" at least, with a gray beard that fell to his chest and arms covered in faded tattoos that told stories older than Sadie herself. His leather vest bore patches that made Shane Prescott take a full step backward. Hellsangels. The rider killed the engine and dismounted slowly, deliberately, like a man who had all the time in the world and none of the patience. He didn't speak, didn't need to. His presence alone changed the temperature of the alley, changed the math, changed everything. This ain't your business, old man. Shane tried to sound tough, but his voice cracked on the last word. Cracked wide open like an egg dropped on a kitchen floor. The biker took one step forward. Just one. I'm making it my business. His voice was gravel and smoke, low and dangerous. It was the kind of voice that didn't make threats, it made promises. Sadie had never heard anything so terrifying, or so beautiful. Shane's friends were already backing away, self-preservation overriding whatever loyalty they thought they had. Their eyes were wide, their feet were moving before their brains caught up. You know who my uncle is, Shane tried again. His last card. His only card. Don't care. Another step forward. Shane flinched like the words had been a fist. He straightened his jacket and tried to save face, but his hands were shaking, and everyone could see it. We were just leaving anyway. This ain't over. It's over, the biker said. And if I see you near her again, we're going to have a different kind of conversation. The kind you don't walk away from. Understand? Shane's face twisted with something between rage and fear. Fear won. It always does when the stakes are real. He jerked his head at his friends, and they retreated down the alley. Their footsteps were quick and uneven. Not quite running, but close enough. The alley fell silent. Sadie lay on the ground, tears and dirt on her face. Her whole body shaking so hard she thought her bones might come apart. The biker walked past her without a word. He picked up her wheelchair, righted it, checked the wheels to make sure they still spun true. Then he brought it back and set it down beside her. "Can you pull yourself up?" His voice had changed. Still rough still, deep enough to rattle windows, but softer somehow. Patient, like a man talking to a wounded animal he didn't want to spook. "I think so." It took 3 tries. Her arms felt like they'd been filled with water. Her shoulder screamed where she'd landed on it. But she managed to drag herself into the seat, grabbing the armrest with fingers that wouldn't stop trembling. "Thank you," she breathed. "Thank you so much." The biker nodded once, already turning back toward his motorcycle. Already leaving. "Wait," Sadie called out, her voice stronger now. "Please. What's your name?" He paused. His back was to her. She could see the patches on his vest, the faded ink crawling up the back of his neck, the years he carried in the set of his shoulders. "Hawk, I'm Sadie. Sadie Dawson." Silence. "Why did you help me?" she asked. "You don't even know me." He stood there for a long moment. Then he looked back. Something flickered in his eyes, something old and heavy and full of a pain she recognized because she carried the same kind. Because someone should have. Then he was on his bike. The engine roared to life, and he was gone. Sadie sat in that alley for a long time, letting her heart rate come down, letting the tears dry on her face, letting the adrenaline drain out of her body until she felt hollow and light and strangely, impossibly alive. Her shoulder throbbed. Her face ached where Shane had grabbed her. But she was breathing. She was here. She was still here. The sun was setting by the time she made it home. Her apartment was small, a studio really, modified for wheelchair access on the first floor of an old Victorian house that had been carved up into units decades ago. One room that served as bedroom and living room and kitchen all at once. A bathroom with grab bars and a roll-in shower. A window that looked out onto a parking lot, and beyond that, the back of a laundromat. It wasn't much, but it was hers. The only thing she'd managed to hold on to after the accident, after the hospital, after the rehabilitation center, where she'd spent 4 months learning how to live in a body that had been cut in half. After the lawyers who picked her parents' estate clean. After the medical bills ate through everything her mother and father had left behind like fire through paper. 2 years, that's how long it had been. 2 years since the drunk driver crossed the center line on Route 9 and took everything from her in the space of 3 seconds. Her parents, her legs, her future. Every plan she'd ever made, every dream she'd ever dreamed erased in a single flash of headlights and the screaming of metal against metal. She'd been 23 years old, sitting in the back seat, reading a book by the dome light while her father drove and her mother hummed along to the radio. A normal night, an ordinary family. And then the world ended. The doctors told her she was lucky. Lucky to be alive. Lucky the spinal damage was where it was and not higher. Lucky she still had her arms, her mind, her future. She'd wanted to scream at them. Wanted to ask what kind of future a 23-year-old orphan in a wheelchair was supposed to build. But she didn't. She just nodded and said thank you and went through the motions of recovery because that's what people expected. And somehow, impossibly, she'd survived. She'd gotten the apartment. She'd gotten the job at the library. She'd learned to grocery shop from a wheelchair and cook on a lowered counter and transfer herself in and out of bed without help. She'd built a life, small and quiet and lonely, but a life. Sadie locked the door behind her, then she locked it again. She wheeled to the window and peered through the blinds at the parking lot below. Empty. No black SUV, no Shane. But he knew where she worked now. He'd cornered her within 2 blocks of her apartment. How long before he figured out where she lived? How long before he came back? Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She made herself eat. Crackers and cheese, all she could stomach. Then she took a hot shower that turned her skin pink and raw. The water couldn't wash away the feeling of Shane's fingers on her face, but she stood under the spray until the tank ran cold and tried anyway. That night, she dreamed of the accident. She always dreamed of the accident. 2 years hadn't dulled it. 2 years hadn't softened the edges, or blurred the details, or done any of the things people promised time would do. They said it gets easier. They said the memories fade. They lied. The dream was always the same. Always sharp, always merciless. The headlights coming out of nowhere. Her mother's scream, high and thin and cut short by the impact. Her father's hands on the wheel knuckles white, trying to swerve, trying to save them. Trying to perform one final act of fatherhood in the half second before physics made it impossible. The sound of metal folding in on itself. The windshield turning into a constellation of broken glass. The world spinning, rolling, coming apart at the seams. And then the silence. The terrible ringing silence that came after everything ended and before the pain began. She woke at 3 a.m, gasping, tangled in sweat-soaked sheets. Her legs that she could not feel were somehow on fire in the dream. Her hands were reaching for her mother. Always reaching. The room was dark, silent, normal. Then she saw it. A shadow moved past her window. Slow, deliberate. Sadie held her breath, stayed perfectly still, watched. The shadow moved again. A figure, human, standing in the parking lot below her building, looking up, looking at her window. Sadie didn't sleep again that night. Morning came gray and heavy with clouds. Sadie got ready for work on autopilot, her movements slow and clumsy from exhaustion. She thought about calling in sick, thought about staying hidden behind her locked door where it was safe. But safe from what exactly was safe? For how long? Shane had made his threat clear. Hiding wouldn't change that. Hiding would only delay it. She went to work. The Riverside Public Library sat at the end of Main Street, a red brick building with tall windows and wooden floors that creaked with character. It had been built in 1932 by a family who believed that books could save a town. Maybe they were right. Maybe they were just dreamers. Either way, the building had outlasted the family by 50 years and showed no signs of giving up. The library had become Sadie's sanctuary in the 2 years since the accident. She worked there 3 days a week, sometimes more. Shelving books, helping patrons find what they were looking for, running the computer lab for seniors who needed help sending emails to their grandchildren, losing herself in stories that let her forget her own, at least for a few hours at a time. The work wasn't glamorous, the pay barely covered her rent, but the library gave her something no paycheck could measure: a reason to get up in the morning, a place where she was useful, a world of other lives she could step into when her own became too heavy to carry. Dorothy Fielding, the head librarian, looked up as Sadie wheeled through the automatic doors. Dorothy was a tall woman in her early 60s with silver hair pulled back in a loose bun and reading glasses perpetually perched on the end of her nose. She wore cardigans year-round and sensible shoes and a face that noticed everything and said only what was necessary. She had run the library for 20 years. She had survived 3 budget cuts, 2 floods, and a county board that thought libraries were obsolete. She was, in Sadie's quiet estimation, the toughest person in Riverside. "You're early. Couldn't sleep," Sadie admitted. Dorothy's eyes studied her for a moment. She saw the circles under Sadie's eyes. She saw the tension in her jaw. She saw the way Sadie's hands gripped her push rims a little too tightly. But she didn't push. She never pushed. That was why Sadie trusted her. New shipment came in. Historical fiction section needs organizing whenever you're ready. Sadie nodded and wheeled herself toward the back of the library, grateful for work that kept her hands busy and her mind quiet. Grateful for the Dewey Decimal System that made sense when nothing else in the world did. The morning passed in comfortable routine. Books in, books out, numbers and categories, and the simple satisfaction of putting things where they belonged. Sadie was reaching for a misplaced biography on a high shelf when she heard them. Voices, low and urgent, coming from the parking lot behind the library. She shouldn't have looked. That's what she would tell herself later, over and over and over. She shouldn't have wheeled to the window. Shouldn't have pushed aside that dusty curtain. But something pulled her there. Some instinct, some curiosity, some terrible gravity that draws people toward the very things that will destroy them. She looked. 3 men stood in a tight circle near a black SUV, the same SUV from the alley. Money changed hands, small plastic bags passed between fingers. Quick, practiced, efficient. like a business transaction, because that's exactly what it was. Sadie recognized the tallest one immediately, Shane Prescott. Even from behind a dirty window, she could see his face, his posture, the way he stood like a man who owned the ground beneath his feet and everyone standing on it. Then he looked up. Their eyes met through the glass. Sadie's blood turned to ice. Every cell in her body screamed at her to move, to look away, to pretend she hadn't seen what she'd seen. But she was frozen, pinned by his stare, held in place by the cold recognition in his eyes. She yanked the curtain closed. Her heart slammed against her ribs so hard she thought it might crack them. Her hands trembled on her wheels. Her breath came in short, shallow gasps that didn't seem to bring any air. Sadie, Dorothy's voice made her jump so violently she nearly tipped her chair. You okay? You look pale. I'm fine. The lie tasted bitter, just tired. She finished her shift in a fog, checking over her shoulder every few minutes, flinching at every footstep, every closing door, every shadow that moved across the floor. When 5 o'clock finally came, she practically flew toward the back entrance. But this time she didn't take the alley. This time she took the long way home. Down Main Street, past the shops and restaurants, past the people walking their dogs, and the children playing in the park. She stayed where there were eyes, where there were witnesses, where even Shane Prescott wouldn't try anything. She made it home, locked the door, checked the windows, breathed, but she could feel it now. The walls closing in, the net tightening. She'd seen his face through that window, and he'd seen hers, and there was no taking it back. No pretending it hadn't happened. She was a witness now, and in a town where the sheriff was the criminal's uncle, a witness was the most dangerous thing you could be. 2 days passed, then 3. Sadie started to wonder if maybe she'd overreacted. Maybe Shane had bigger things to worry about than a girl in a wheelchair. Maybe the alley had been enough. A message delivered, a lesson learned. Maybe he'd move on. She was wrong. On the 4th day, she came out of the library for her lunch break and found her wheelchair tires slashed. Both of them, clean cuts, deliberate and precise. The kind of cuts made by a man who wanted you to know exactly how vulnerable you were. A note was tucked under the armrest, 3 words in block letters on a torn scrap of paper. Keep your mouth shut. Sadie didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't do anything except sit there staring at the ruined rubber and the ugly words paralyzed in a way that had nothing to do with her legs. Dorothy found her 10 minutes later. Sadie, what happened? She saw the tires, saw the note. Her face went white. We need to call the police. Number. The word came out sharp, harder than Sadie intended. But the thought of calling the police, of calling Sheriff Wade Prescott's department and reporting his nephew was so absurd it almost made her laugh. Almost. Honey, this is serious. Someone threatened you. I know who it was. And calling the police won't help. Trust me. Dorothy's eyes searched her face. She was a smart woman. She'd been running the library for 20 years. She knew how this town worked. She knew who held the power and who didn't. This has something to do with what you saw yesterday, doesn't it? Through the window, Sadie said nothing. That was an answer enough. Stay here, Dorothy said. I'm going to find you a way home. She disappeared into the back office. Sadie heard her making phone calls, her voice low and efficient. 20 minutes later, a pickup truck pulled into the library parking lot. The driver was a young man with kind eyes and careful hands. I'm Tommy, he said. Mrs. Fielding called my mom. She runs the women's shelter on Oak Street. We've got a spare wheelchair you can use until yours gets fixed. Sadie wanted to refuse, wanted to insist she could handle this herself. But her ruined tires told a different story. A story about power and helplessness and the distance between the two. Thank you, she said quietly. Tommy loaded her into the truck with practiced ease. As they pulled out of the lot, Sadie looked back at the library, at the window where she'd made the mistake that was unraveling her life. My mom says you should come stay at the shelter for a few days, Tommy offered. Just until things cool down. I appreciate that, but I'll be okay at home. She wasn't okay at home. The apartment felt different when she got back. Smaller, more exposed. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat. Every creak of the old house made her flinch. She checked the locks 3 times before she could make herself sit down. That's when she noticed the window. It was open. Just a crack. Just enough to let in the cooling evening air. Sadie never left her windows open. She wheeled closer. Her heart was hammering so hard she could hear it in her ears. The screen had been cut, a neat slice right through the mesh. Clean and deliberate, just like the tire cuts. Someone had been in her apartment. While she was at work, while she was sitting in the library pretending everything was normal, someone had walked into her home. Sadie's vision tunneled. Her hands gripped the wheels so hard her knuckles went white. Think, she told herself. Think. Nothing looked disturbed. No drawers open. No belongings missing. Nothing out of place. But that was the point. They hadn't come to steal. They'd come to send a message. They wanted her to know they could reach her, whenever they wanted, wherever she went. She grabbed her phone and stared at the screen. Her options scrolled through her mind like a list written in someone else's handwriting. She could call the police, report a break-in. But Shane's uncle ran the department. Reporting it would only put a target on her back. She could call the shelter. Hide there until this blew over. But when would it blow over? Derek wasn't going to forget about her. He wasn't going to wake up one morning and decide she wasn't a threat anymore. She could run, pack a bag, disappear, start over somewhere new, somewhere nobody knew her name or her face or what she'd seen through a dirty library window. But she'd already started over once, after the accident, after losing everything. She'd built this life from nothing, piece by painful piece, day by agonizing day. She'd learned to dress herself without legs, learned to cook from a wheelchair, learned to navigate a world that wasn't built for her. She'd clawed her way back to something that resembled living. She wasn't ready to lose it again. There was one other option. Sadie stared at her phone for a long time. Then she opened the browser and typed 2 words. Hawk. Hell's Angels. She added the town name. Riverside, Tennessee. The results were surprisingly sparse. A few old news articles, mostly from the 80s and 90s. Bar fights, arrest, trouble that trailed motorcycle clubs like exhaust fumes. But one name kept appearing in the older records. Nathan Briggs, known as Hawk, former Hell's Angels member. Now semi-retired, owner of Briggs Auto Repair on the outskirts of town. Sadie memorized the address. The next morning she called in sick to work. Dorothy didn't argue, didn't ask questions, just told her to be careful, which meant she understood more than she was saying. The ride to the garage took 45 minutes in the borrowed wheelchair. Her arms burned. Her shoulders screamed where she'd landed on it in the alley. The chair squeaked with every rotation, announcing her presence to every bird and squirrel within 100 yards. The garage was exactly what she'd expected. Grease-stained concrete, old cars in various states of repair, the smell of motor oil and gasoline hanging in the air like a permanent fog. Tools lined the walls in orderly rows. A radio played classic country from somewhere deep inside the building. Hawk was under a lifted truck when she arrived. Only his boots were visible, scarred and oil-stained boots that had walked a lot of hard roads. "Hello," Sadie called out. "Mr. Briggs." The boots shifted. A moment later, Hawk slid out on a creeper, wiping his hands on a rag that was dirtier than his hands. His face registered surprise first, then something harder to read, something guarded. "You shouldn't be here." "I know, but I didn't know where else to go." Hawk stood up. He towered over her even more than he had in the alley. In the daylight, she could see his face more clearly. The deep lines around his eyes carved there by decades of sun and wind and a life that aged him from the inside out. A scar bisected his left eyebrow, thick and white against his weathered skin. His eyes were gray, not the soft gray of morning fog, but the hard gray of gunmetal, of storm clouds before they break. And beneath all the hardness, a weariness that seemed to go all the way to the bone. What happened? Sadie told him everything. The slashed tires, the note, the cut window screen, the figure standing in the parking lot at 3 in the morning, the feeling of being watched, hunted, trapped like an animal in a box with the walls closing in. Hawk listened without interrupting. His expression grew darker with each detail, like clouds stacking up on the horizon before a tornado. "Shane Prescott," he said when she finished. "It wasn't a question. You know him, know of him. His uncle's been running this town for going on 15 years now. Dirty as they come, but smart enough to keep it hidden. So you understand why I can't go to the police." Hawk nodded slowly. His hands were still. His eyes were not. "What exactly do you want from me?" Sadie met his gaze. She didn't look away, didn't soften her voice, didn't play the victim. She'd had enough of being a victim. "I want to feel safe again, even if it's just for one night. The silence between them stretched like a wire pulled tight. Hawk's jaw worked. He was chewing on words he didn't want to say, wrestling with something inside himself that Sadie couldn't see but could feel. "This ain't my fight," he said finally. "I know. I don't do this anymore. Haven't for years, I know. If I get involved, it brings trouble for both of us. More trouble than you've already got." "I know." Sadie let the silence sit. Let it do its work. Then she said the only thing left to say. "But I don't have anyone else. My parents are dead. I don't have family. Don't have friends who can help with something like this. You're the only person who's ever stood up for me." "Ever." Hawk looked away, his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. She could see the war happening behind his eyes. The part of him that had walked away from this life fighting against the part that couldn't walk away from her. "You remind me of someone," he said quietly. "Who?" He didn't answer. Instead, he walked to the garage door and stood there looking out at the empty road. Sadie watched his back, watched the tension in his shoulders, watched the way he held himself like a man standing on the edge of something he'd spent years backing away from. "There's a room above the shop," he said without turning around. "It ain't much, but it's got a lock on the door and a bed that's clean enough. You can stay there tonight. Just tonight. Thank you." Sadie's voice was barely a whisper. "Thank you so much. Don't thank me yet." Hawk finally turned to face her. His eyes were hard again, but not cold. Cautious. The eyes of a man who knew exactly what he was getting into and didn't like it one bit. "If Shane finds out you're here, things are going to get a lot worse before they get better. I understand." "No." Something flashed in his gaze. "You don't, not yet." He grabbed a set of keys from a hook on the wall and led her to a side door. The stairs were a problem. Sadie stared at them with the familiar frustration that came every time the world reminded her it wasn't built for a woman in a wheelchair. Hawk solved it without a word. He reached down, gripped the frame of her chair, and lifted. The wheelchair, Sadie all of it. He carried them both up the stairs like they weighed nothing. Like it was the easiest thing he'd done all day. The room was small but clean. A single bed with a plaid blanket, a wooden dresser with a lamp on top, a window overlooking the garage lot, a bathroom that had been modified with grab bars beside the toilet and in the shower. The modifications weren't new. Clearly someone with mobility issues had stayed here before. "There's food in the mini fridge," Hawk said. "Nothing fancy. Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone but me." Sadie nodded. Then before he could leave, she asked the question that had been burning in her since the alley. "Mr. Briggs." "Hawk." "Hawk, why are you helping me, really?" He stood in the doorway for a long moment. His massive frame blocked out the light from the hallway, turning him into a silhouette. A shadow. The kind of shadow that doesn't threaten but protects. "I had a daughter once," he said. His voice had changed. The gravel was still there, but something underneath it had shifted. Cracked open. Her name was Lily. Sadie waited. The room was very quiet. Even the wind outside seemed to hold its breath. "She died 5 years ago. 23 years old." His voice was flat. Carefully, deliberately flat. The way a man speaks when he's holding back a flood with nothing but willpower. "I wasn't there when she needed me. I was on the road. Living my life. Pretending the club was my family. By the time I came back." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. "I'm sorry," Sadie said. "Don't be sorry. Be smart. Stay inside. Stay quiet. And if anything feels wrong, you call me." He handed her a card. Just a phone number scrawled in pencil on a piece of cardboard torn from a box. Day or night. Then he was gone. And Sadie was alone with the ghost of his daughter and the ghosts of her own parents and all the other people they'd both lost. She locked the door behind him. She sat in the quiet room and looked at the grab bars in the bathroom and wondered about the woman or the man who had stayed here before. Wondered who else Hawk had lifted up those stairs. Wondered how many broken people had found shelter in this small room above a garage on the edge of a town that was rotting from the inside out. For the first time in 4 days, her hands stopped shaking. For the first time in 4 days, she slept. She woke to the sound of breaking glass. Sadie shot upright, heart hammering, disoriented by the unfamiliar room. The darkness pressed against the windows like something alive. She reached for her phone with one hand and her wheelchair with the other. 2:47 in the morning. Another crash came from below. Then voices. Angry voices. Then the sound of metal being struck. Over and over. Sadie pulled herself into her chair and wheeled to the window. Below in the garage lot, three figures moved through the shadows. One of them held something that caught the moonlight. A crowbar. They were smashing Hawk's cars, his equipment, his tools, moving from vehicle to vehicle with methodical viciousness. Windows exploded inward. Hoods buckled. Headlights shattered and scattered across the pavement like broken teeth. Then one of them looked up, directly at her window. Even in the darkness, even from the second floor, she recognized him. Shane Prescott smiled. He lifted one hand in a slow, mocking wave. A wave that said, "I see you." A wave that said, "There is nowhere you can go." A wave that said, "I will always find you." Sadie yanked herself away from the glass. Her whole body shook. She pressed her back against the wall and tried to breathe and couldn't. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You can't hide from us. Not behind cops. Not behind bikers. Not behind anyone. Next time we won't just break glass." Below, an engine roared to life. Tires squealed against asphalt. Then silence. Sadie sat in the dark, her phone clutched to her chest. Her heartbeat the only sound in the room. She sat there and waited for morning because there was nothing else to do. Because the night had teeth and she was alone, and the only man who could help her was sleeping downstairs, surrounded by the wreckage of the life he'd built after losing everything just like her. When Hawk found the damage at dawn, his face went still. Not angry, not shocked. Still. The kind of stillness that frightened Sadie more than Shane ever had. The kind of stillness that comes before the storm breaks, before the earthquake hits, before the dam gives way. He walked through this destruction slowly, methodically, cataloging every broken window, every dented hood, every piece of equipment that had been smashed beyond repair. A hydraulic lift bent at the base. A toolbox overturned wrenches and sockets scattered across the concrete like spent shell casings. Three vehicles that customers had trusted him to repair, now damaged worse than when they'd been brought in. Thousands of dollars of damage, maybe tens of thousands. 20 years of building a legitimate business. 20 years of proving that a man could walk away from the outlaw life and make something decent. All of it violated in a single night by a 20-something punk with a crowbar and an uncle with the badge. Then he saw the spray paint. On the garage wall, in letters 3 feet high, someone had written 2 sentences in dripping red. "Dead men don't talk. Neither do dead girls." This was a message Hawk said quietly. His voice was controlled. Too controlled. Like a pressure cooker with the valve sealed shut. "I'm so sorry." Tears ran down Sadie's face. "This is my fault. I shouldn't have come here. I shouldn't have involved you. I'll leave. I'll figure something else out. I'll stop." The word cut through her spiral like a blade. "This isn't your fault." Hawk turned to face her. His eyes were different than they'd been the day before. Something new burned there. Not just the protectiveness she'd seen in the alley. Not just the sympathy he'd shown when she'd told him about the break-in. Anger. Cold focus, terrifying in its clarity. This is Shane Prescott thinking he can do whatever he wants to, whoever he wants, and nobody's going to lift a finger. And he's wrong. Hawk pulled out his phone, old and battered with a cracked screen and a case held together with electrical tape. He dialed a number and waited. Someone answered on the third ring. "Boone. It's Hawk." A pause. Sadie could hear a voice on the other end, surprised. Maybe it's a little cautious. "Yeah, I know it's been a while. Listen, I need a favor. Actually, I need more than a favor." Another pause. The voice on the other end grew quieter, more serious. "I need the old crew." Sadie watched him pace. 3 steps one direction, 3 steps back. The phone pressed to his ear like a weapon. "How many can you get?" he asked. "No, I'm serious. This is real. He stopped, listened. "Yeah, that's exactly what I mean." He hung up and looked at Sadie. His face was set. His jaw could have been carved from the same concrete his garage was built on. "What did you just do?" Sadie asked. Hawk's smile held no warmth. None at all. It was the smile of a man who had spent years walking away from violence and had just turned around. "I just made a few phone calls. By tomorrow, Shane Prescott is going to learn what happens when you mess with family." The word landed on Sadie like a hand on her shoulder. Like a blanket pulled over her in the cold. Like a door opening in a house where every door had been locked. Family Hawk walked over and crouched down so they were at eye level. Up close, she could see the pain he carried, the loss, the guilt, the years of regret etched into his skin like the tattoos on his arms. But underneath all of that, something else. Something she hadn't expected to find in the eyes of a retired outlaw biker in a ruined garage at 6 in the morning. Hope. My daughter is gone, he said quietly. I can't change that. Can't bring her back. Can't undo the years I wasted on the road while she needed me. His voice caught, just for a moment, then the steel came back. But maybe I can make sure what happened to her doesn't happen to anyone else. Starting with you. Sadie didn't have words, couldn't find them through the tears that blurred her vision and ran hot down her cheeks and dripped onto her hands. Hawk straightened up and headed for the stairs. Get some rest, he said. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Sadie watched him go. Her mind spun with everything that had happened. 4 days ago, she'd been a library clerk with a quiet life and a painful past. 4 days ago, the biggest challenge in her day was reaching books on high shelves. 4 days ago, the world made sense in the small, sad, manageable way it had made sense since the accident. Now she was caught in the middle of something bigger than she'd ever imagined. A drug operation protected by the sheriff himself. A threat that grew larger every day. A man who had lost his daughter and found in Sadie something he wasn't ready to name. And somehow, impossibly against every odd and every expectation, she wasn't alone anymore. Sadie wheeled back to the window. She looked out at the ruined cars below, at the spray-painted words on the wall. Dead men don't talk, neither do dead girls. She stared at those words for a long time, and something shifted inside her. Something small, hard bright. Like a coal buried in ash for 2 years, suddenly catching a draft of air. She was scared. She was angry. She was a 20-something woman in a wheelchair with no family and no power and no reason to believe that anything she did would make any difference at all. But she was also her father's daughter, and her father had never looked away from the truth. Not once. Not ever. Not even when looking at the truth cost him everything. Sadie picked up her phone, she opened the browser, and she started to research. Not randomly, not desperately, methodically, the way a librarian works, the way her father, the accountant, would have worked. One thread at a time, one connection at a time, building a picture from scattered pieces until the picture became undeniable. If she was going to survive this, she needed to know everything. Everything about Shane, everything about Sheriff Wade Prescott, everything about the drug operation they were running right under everyone's noses. She needed evidence, proof, something that couldn't be ignored or covered up or explained away. She needed to build a case, and she knew exactly where to start. She was a librarian after all. Finding information was what she did. Connecting dots was what she did. The library had access to county records, public filings, news archives. She knew those databases better than anyone. She'd spent 2 years organizing other people's knowledge. Now it was time to use that skill for herself. She opened a new document on her phone and started typing. Names, dates, locations, everything she'd seen, everything she knew, everything she suspected. She cross-referenced news articles with public records. She pulled up county databases she'd bookmarked during her library work. She searched social media accounts and local obituaries and property records. The sun climbed higher. The garage below was quiet. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear Hawk moving among the wreckage of his cars, taking stock, making plans. The sound of a broom sweeping broken glass. The clang of a dented fender being moved aside. The quiet sounds of a man putting his world back together. And Sadie Dawson sat in a small room above that broken garage and began the work that would either save her life or end it. She had no badge, no gun, no legs, no family name that carried weight. But she had a librarian's mind. She had an accountant's daughter's instinct for numbers that didn't add up. And she had something else. Something she hadn't felt since before the accident, since before the headlights and the screaming metal and the silence that followed. She had a reason to fight. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was hunting. When Hawk came up the stairs 2 hours later, carrying 2 cups of coffee and a tired expression, he found her surrounded by notes. Pages and pages of them spread across the bed and the floor and the dresser. Names connected by arrows, dates circled in red, a web of information that was starting to take shape. He handed her a cup without a word. Then he looked at the notes. His eyes moved from page to page. His expression shifted from curiosity to something like surprise. What is all this? Everything I could find on Shane Prescott, Sheriff Wade Prescott, and every suspicious death in this county for the last 5 years. Hawk set down his coffee. How many? At least 3. Overdose deaths all ruled accidental. But the patterns don't add up. Young people, no history of drug use, all connected to the same social circles, all within 15 miles of Riverside. Hawk was quiet for a long moment. You did all this in 2 hours. I'm good at research. It's what I do. This isn't library research, Sadie. This is dangerous. These are dangerous people. I know. Sadie met his eyes. That's why we need evidence they can't deny. You can call your friends. You can bring in every biker in Tennessee. But if we don't have proof, if we don't have something that will stand up in a courtroom, none of it matters. Shane walks free. His uncle keeps his badge. And the next person who sees something they shouldn't see ends up like me. Or worse. Hawk stared at her for a long time. His expression shifted. Respect maybe, or recognition. The look a man gives when he sees something in someone else that he didn't expect to find. The look her father might have given her if he'd lived long enough to see what she was becoming. Your daddy was like that too, he said quietly. Saw things other people missed. Made connections that seemed impossible until he explained them. He had a mind like a trap. Once something went in, it didn't come out until he'd turned it over from every angle. The words hit Sadie like a wave. She set down her coffee. Her hands were suddenly unsteady. You knew my father. Hawk's expression shifted. He looked away, looked out the window at the broken cars, in the spray-painted wall, in the empty road beyond. Hawk, Sadie wheeled closer. Did you know my parents? This isn't the time for, did you know them? The garage fell silent. The birds outside went quiet. Even the wind seemed to pause. I knew your daddy, Hawk said. Long time ago, before you were born, we grew up in the same neighborhood, ran in the same circles for a while before he straightened out and made something of himself. Sadie's mind was spinning. He never mentioned. I never knew. He wanted a different life. For himself, for your mama, for you. We lost touch after he got married. I heard about the accident on the news. Hawk's voice roughened. He cleared his throat, but the roughness stayed. I didn't know the girl in the wheelchair was Jack Dawson's daughter until I saw your face up close in that alley. You got his eyes. Same eyes. Same stubborn set to your jaw when you've made up your mind about something. Tears ran down Sadie's face and she didn't bother wiping them away. I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner, Hawk continued. I wasn't sure how to. Wasn't sure you'd want to know. Of course I want to know, Sadie's voice cracked. I want to know everything. I don't have anyone left who remembers them. Hawk nodded slowly. His eyes were bright. Not with tears exactly. Men like Hawk didn't cry, but with something close. Something human. Raw. Real. Then we'll talk, he said. After this is over, I'll tell you every story I've got. Sadie believed him. She believed every word. And somewhere in the ruins of her grief, her fear, her fury, a new foundation was being laid. Not of concrete or steel, but of something harder. Something that Shane Prescott and his uncle and every corrupt official in Riverside couldn't break. Connection. Trust. The beginning of a family she never expected to find. Hawk cleared his throat again. The crew will be here tomorrow morning. 6 riders, maybe more. People I trust with my life. Sadie wiped her face with the back of her hand. She gathered her notes. She squared her shoulders. She looked at the man who had known her father and saved her life and was now standing in a doorway, deciding to risk everything for a stranger who wasn't really a stranger at all. Good, she said, because when they get here, I'm going to need to brief them. I know what Shane's been doing. I know how long he's been doing it, and I'm starting to see where the bodies are buried. Hawk raised an eyebrow. I don't want a war, Hawk. I want evidence. I want a case so airtight that not even Sheriff Wade Prescott can make it disappear. I want to take down every single person involved in this, and I want to do it the right way. The legal way, the way my father would have done it. Hawk looked at her for a long moment. Then he did something she hadn't seen him do before. He smiled. It was small, brief, gone almost before it arrived. But it was real, and it changed his face completely, turned him from a mountain of leather and scars into something almost gentle. Your daddy would have loved seeing this, he said. You know that Sadie looked down at her notes, at the web of connections she'd built in 2 hours with nothing but a phone and a librarian's knowledge of how to find things that didn't want to be found. Then let's make sure it counts, she said. Hawk nodded. He picked up his coffee, took a long sip, and headed for the stairs. Tomorrow, he said, everything changes tomorrow. He was right, but neither of them knew yet just how much. They came with the morning. Sadie heard them before she saw them, the rumble of engines building in the distance like a gathering storm. Not one motorcycle, not two. Six, maybe more, rolling in formation down the county road, the sound swelling until it filled the garage lot and rattled the windows in their frames and shook the coffee in her cup. She willed herself to the window and looked down. 6 motorcycles had arranged themselves in a loose semicircle in front of the ruined garage. Chrome and black steel and leather. The riders dismounted one by one, pulling off helmets and gloves, revealing faces that looked like they'd been carved from the hard side of every road in America. These were not young men. These were men who had lived. Men who had survived what kills most people before 50. Hawk was already down there, standing in the middle of the wreckage, waiting. Sadie watched him greet them, handshakes that turned into embraces, laughter that was rough and warm at the same time, the language of men who had shared roads and risks and years they couldn't get back. She gathered her notes, every page, every connection, every thread she'd pulled in the hours since she'd started digging. Then she went downstairs. Hawk had cleared a space among the damaged cars and scattered tools. Folding chairs sat in a rough circle. Someone had set up a card table in the center. It wasn't pretty, but it was functional, like everything else about these people. A massive man approached first. He was black, built like a truck, with arms that could have bent railroad ties, and a smile that was surprisingly almost impossibly warm. He pulled Hawk into a bear hug that lifted the older man off his feet. Hawk, you old bastard. Thought you were done with all this. So did I, Boone. So did I. The man, Big Boone Crawford, turned to look at Sadie. His eyes were sharp and assessing, but not unkind. Eyes that measured people quickly and accurately. This the girl, Sadie Dawson Hawk said. Sadie, this is Boone Crawford. We rode together for 20 years, ma'am. Boone tipped an imaginary hat. Hawk says you got yourself in some trouble. I saw something I shouldn't have. Now the sheriff's nephew wants me dead. Boone's eyebrows rose. He looked at Hawk. She don't sugarcoat it, does she? No. She doesn't. The other riders had gathered closer now. Hawk introduced them one by one. Tex Harlan, a wiry man with a silver ponytail that hung to the middle of his back and a Texas drawl so thick you could spread it on biscuits. Wrench Morrison, who'd gotten his name from his weapon of choice in a bar fight 30 years ago and had never bothered to explain whether the story was true. Dalton Griggs, quiet and watchful with sad eyes that had seen too much, and a stillness about him that suggested he was always listening and always cataloging, always ready. And 2 women, Dolores, who everyone called Mama D, a formidable presence with gray-streaked hair and a leather jacket covered in patches that told their own story. A face that could comfort a crying child or stare down a grown man with equal ease. And her daughter Jolene, younger, but cut from the same steel with her mother's jaw and her own fire burning behind dark eyes. They looked at the destroyed garage, at the spray-painted threats, at the smashed cars and scattered glass. Their faces told the same story. Not surprise, not shock, anger. The quiet, controlled anger of people who had seen this before and never once tolerated it. So Mama D said, her voice carrying the weight of a woman who did not ask questions she didn't already know the answers to. Shane Prescott did all this. 3 in the morning, Hawk confirmed. Sadie saw the whole thing from upstairs. Little punk. Tex spat on the ground. His daddy was the same way. Mean as a snake and twice as stupid. His daddy's dead, Boone said. Killed in a prison fight 6 years back. Good riddance. Mama D approached Sadie, her expression softened. Not into weakness, but into something deeper. Understanding, maybe. Recognition of one woman's pain by another woman who carried her own. Honey, Hawk told us what happened in that alley. You okay? Sadie didn't know how to answer that question honestly. Was she okay? She hadn't felt okay in 2 years, maybe longer. Maybe she'd never been okay and the accident had just stripped away the pretending. I'm alive, she said finally. That's something. Mama D nodded slowly. That's everything, sweetheart. That's everything. The group moved inside, away from the street, away from any eyes that might be watching. They settled into the folding chairs. Sadie positioned her wheelchair at the edge of the circle. She wanted to make herself small, force of habit, the habit of someone who had spent 2 years trying not to take up space. But then she looked down at the notes in her lap, the hours of research, the connections she'd found, the patterns nobody else had bothered to look for. And she realized that making herself small was exactly what Shane Prescott was counting on. She wheeled herself to the center of the circle. Here's what we know, Hawk began. Shane Prescott is running drugs through Riverside. His uncle Sheriff Wade Prescott is providing cover. They've been at it for years, getting bolder. 3 people are dead from overdoses connected to their supply. Maybe more. And now they're targeting Sadie because she can identify Shane Boone finished. Not just identify him, Sadie spoke up, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. Surprised by the way every head in the room turned toward her and stayed. I've been researching all night, and what I found is bigger than a nephew selling pills behind a library. She spread her notes across the card table. 3 deaths in 18 months. Marcus Webb Jr., age 19. Jennifer Crane, 24. Danny Whitfield, 20 years old. All ruled accidental overdoses. All cases closed within a week. All investigated by Sheriff Wade Prescott's department. She pointed to the connections she'd drawn between the names. Marcus Webb was found dead in his apartment last March. The police report says he was alone, but his mother posted on social media that he called her that night, said someone gave him bad pills at a party. She tried to report it. The sheriff told her she was grieving and imagining things. Sadie moved to the next name, Jennifer Crane, found in her car at a rest stop on Highway 12. Overdose, they said. Case closed in 4 days. 4 days for a 24-year-old woman found dead in her car. No toxicology follow-up. No investigation into where the drugs came from. And Danny Whitfield, she continued. Her voice caught on his name, though she didn't know why. Maybe because he was the youngest. Maybe because his story felt the closest to her own. 20 years old, went to a party at the old Millbrook barn. Never came home. His grandmother is a retired nurse. She told the sheriff Danny didn't use drugs. The sheriff told her she was confused. The room was silent, the kind of silence that has weight, that presses down on everyone in it. Tex was the first to break it. Girl's got a point. This ain't something we can punch our way out of. We need evidence that'll stick. We need to keep her alive long enough to use it, Dalton added quietly. His voice was low and careful. Every word measured. Shane's not going to stop. He can't. She knows too much. Mama D leaned forward. What exactly did you see? Honey, walk us through it. Sadie took a breath. Money and drugs changing hands behind the library. Shane was there with 2 other men. I didn't recognize them, but I could describe them in detail. Shane saw me watching through the window. Instead of laying low, he escalated. Came after me in the alley. Slashed my tires. Broke into my apartment. Destroyed this garage. Boone shook his head. Stupid. Drawing more attention to himself. He's scared, Hawk said. That makes him dangerous. He's always been dangerous, Mama D corrected. She paused. Something crossed her face, a shadow. A memory she didn't want to share but was going to share anyway. Remember the Patterson girl 3 years ago? Something cold crawled down Sadie's spine. What Patterson girl? The bikers exchanged glances. A conversation happened without words. Finally, Mama D spoke. Sarah Patterson, 22 years old, worked at the diner on 5th Street, started dating Shane for a few months, then tried to break it off. She disappeared. Police said she probably ran off with some boyfriend. Case closed. She didn't run off, Sadie said. It wasn't a question. No, she didn't. The cold thing on Sadie's spine sank deeper, settled into her bones. How many, she asked, how many people has he hurt that nobody talks about? Too many, Hawk said. That's why this ends now. The planning took hours. They mapped out Shane's known locations, his patterns, his associates. Sadie shared everything from her research, and the group listened with the focused attention of people who understood that information was a weapon more powerful than any gun or crowbar. By noon, they had a plan. Not perfect, but real. Boone would reach out to a contact at the state police, a detective named Ellen Marsh who owed him a favor from a case years back. Mama D would work her connections at the women's shelter to find other witnesses, other victims, other families who had lost someone and been told to keep quiet. Tex and Wrench would keep eyes on Shane, document his movements, build a timeline of everywhere he went and everyone he met. Dalton and Jolene would stay close to Sadie. Protection. Not obvious, but present. A shadow she could count on. "What do I do?" Sadie asked. "You stay alive," Hawk said, "and you keep digging. The more evidence we have, the harder it'll be for them to bury this. I can do more than that." "Sadie," she cut him off. The force in her own voice surprised her, and it surprised everyone else in the room too. Every eye was on her. "I'm not going to hide in a room while everyone else takes risks for me. I know the library system. I know where the county records are, how to access them, how to cross-reference databases that most people don't even know exist. I can find things nobody else can find. That's not bravery talking. That's just a fact." The room went quiet again. Hawk studied her for a long time. Then something passed across his face, something that looked almost like pride. "All right," he said. "You dig, but you don't go anywhere alone, and you report everything to me. Everything. Deal?" "Deal." The meeting broke up in the early afternoon. The bikers dispersed to their assignments, each one squeezing Sadie's hand or touching her shoulder as they passed. Small gestures, brief, but each one left warmth behind. Mama D lingered. She pressed a card into Sadie's hand. "The shelter's always got room," she said. "Day or night. You need somewhere safe, you call me. Thank you." Mama D cupped Sadie's face in her weathered hands. Her palms were rough, but her touch was gentle. "Your daddy was good people," she said. "The best kind. You make him proud, you hear me?" Sadie nodded, not trusting her voice. After everyone left, Sadie went back to work. She spent the rest of the afternoon at her laptop pulling county records, death certificates, police reports, building her case one document at a time, one connection at a time. She was so deep in concentration that she almost missed the soft knock at the door. She froze, reached for the baseball bat Hawk had left her, wheeled slowly toward the door. "Who is it?" "My name is Clara Whitfield." The voice was female, elderly, trembling slightly like a hand holding a candle in a draft. "I volunteer at the library. Dorothy Fielding sent me. Said you might need to hear what I have to say." Sadie hesitated. Dorothy had mentioned Clara before, a retired nurse who volunteered on weekends, helped with the children's reading program, brought cookies for the staff on holidays. She opened the door. Clara Whitfield was small and white-haired, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and hands that wouldn't stop moving. She looked like she'd walked straight out of a Norman Rockwell painting. Somebody's grandmother. Everybody's grandmother. She also looked terrified. "May I come in, please? I don't want anyone to see me here." Sadie moved aside. Clara slipped through the door and stood in the middle of the room, wringing her hands, her eyes darting toward the window like she expected someone to be watching. "I heard what happened to you," Clara said. "Dorothy told me. The alley, the threats, the break-in, all of it, and I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I tried. Lord knows I tried. But I can't." Quiet about what Clara's eyes filled with tears. They spilled down her wrinkled cheeks, and she didn't wipe them away. She let them fall. "My grandson, Danny, he died 18 months ago. Overdose, they said. But I knew it wasn't an accident." Sadie's breath caught. Danny Whitfield. She'd seen his name in the records just hours ago. She'd traced the lines connecting his death to Shane Prescott and the sheriff's department and the pattern of cover-ups that stretched back years. "He was 20 years old," Clara continued. Her voice broke on the number, on the terrible smallness of it. "He was going to be a teacher. He wanted to help kids learn to read just like I did. Then he went to one party, and he never came home. Mrs. Whitfield. Clara, please." "Clara." Sadie reached out and took the older woman's hand. It was cold, trembling. but it gripped back with surprising strength. "I'm so sorry about Danny. I tried to tell the sheriff." Went to his office the week after the funeral. Sat in that waiting room for 2 hours. When he finally saw me, I told him Danny didn't use drugs, that someone must have given him something, that it wasn't an accident. Clara's jaw tightened. The trembling stopped. Something harder took its place. He looked me right in the eye and said I was confused. Said grief does that to people. Made me feel like a foolish old woman who didn't know what she was talking about. But I was a nurse for 40 years. I know what I saw. I know what killed my grandson. And I know who's responsible. Shane Prescott. Clara nodded. Danny was at a party at the old Millbrook barn. Shane was there. I have Danny's phone. The sheriff never asked for it, never even looked at it. There are texts on that phone, pictures, proof that Shane sold Danny those pills, proof that Shane knew they were laced, proof that my grandson died because a drug dealer gave him poison and a sheriff covered it up. Sadie's heart was racing. Clara, do you still have that phone? It's hidden at my house, under my bed in a box with Danny's other things. I was too scared to do anything with it, too scared to go to anyone because... Who do you go to when the sheriff is the enemy? Clara squeezed Sadie's hand harder. But after I heard about you, about what they did to you, about what you're trying to do, I couldn't stay scared anymore. I've spent 18 months being afraid, and I'm done. I'm done being afraid. I lost my grandson. I won't let them hurt anyone else. Not if I can stop it. Sadie looked at this woman, this small, white-haired 72-year-old woman with wire-rimmed glasses and hands that shook and a spine made of iron. We need to call Hawk, Sadie said. Right now, Hawk arrived within minutes. He listened to Clara's story the same way he'd listened to Sadie's without interrupting, his face growing darker with every word. When she finished, he asked one question. How soon can you get that phone tonight? My sister's visiting for dinner. I'll make an excuse to go to my house alone. It won't seem strange. I'll drive you, Hawk said. No. Clara shook her head. Her voice was firm in a way that left no room for argument. If anyone sees me with you, they'll know something's wrong. I need to do this alone. It's not safe. Nothing is safe anymore, Mr. Briggs. Clara straightened her shoulders. For a moment, Sadie saw the woman she must have been in her working years. A nurse who had held people's hands while they died. A woman who had walked into rooms full of blood and chaos and done her job without flinching. I've spent 18 months hiding. 18 months letting fear keep me from doing the right thing for my Danny. I'm done with that. I'm going. They argued for 20 more minutes. Hawk and Clara went back and forth like two mountains refusing to move. Finally, they reached a compromise. Tex would follow at a distance. Keep eyes on her. If anything seemed wrong, he'd move in. Otherwise, Clara would go alone, get the phone and bring it back. 2 hours, Clara said. 3 at most. If anything feels wrong, I know. I'll be careful. After Clara left, Sadie sat in silence, processing everything. The conspiracy was bigger than she'd imagined. Deeper, wider. A web that stretched from a library parking lot to a barn in the countryside to a sheriff's office to God knew where else. This isn't just about me anymore, Sadie said quietly. Hawk settled into the chair across from her. No, it's not. If we can get that phone, combine it with everything I've found, get it to the state police. It might be enough. Might. Hawk's expression was grim. Shane's not stupid. Reckless mean as hell, definitely. But he's survived this long because he knows how to cover his tracks. We need more than one phone and some circumstantial evidence. Then we get more. Sadie leaned forward. Clara can't be the only one with information. There have to be others. Friends, family members. People who saw things they were too scared to report. I can find them. The certainty in her voice surprised even her. But it was real. As real as the notes spread across the bed behind her. As real as the connection she'd drawn between the dead and the living and the guilty. The phone rang 2 hours and 14 minutes after Clara left. Hawk grabbed it. Tex. Sadie watched his face. Watched the color drain from it. Watched the muscles in his jaw lock tight. Watched his eyes change from alert to something that looked like controlled fury. How bad? A pause. Where another pause. We're coming. He hung up. His hand was steady, but his voice was not. Hawk. What happened Clara's house? Someone beat us there. The drive took 8 minutes. Hawk drove like a man with a fire behind him. Sadie sat beside him in the truck, gripping the door handle, watching the streets blur past. When they arrived, an ambulance was already in the driveway. Red and blue lights spinning against the front of Clara's little white house. Paramedics were loading a stretcher into the back. Sadie could see a small figure beneath the blankets, white hair stained with blood. Tex stood on the sidewalk. His face was gray. His hands hung at his sides like they didn't know what to do anymore. Hawk was out of the truck before it fully stopped. What happened? I lost her. Tex's voice was raw, stripped of everything except guilt. She went inside. I waited just like we planned, but there was a back door. I didn't know about the back door. Someone was already in the house when she got there. Clara. They beat her, Hawk. Beat her bad, real bad. She was barely conscious when the neighbors heard screaming and called 911. Sadie felt tears streaming down her face. Hot, fast, unstoppable. The phone she managed. Did she get the phone? Tex reached into his jacket. He pulled out a small plastic bag. Inside was an iPhone with a cracked screen. The screen was smeared with blood. Clara's blood. She was holding it when I found her. Tex's voice broke. Wouldn't let go, even when the paramedics tried to take it. She grabbed my arm and made me promise. Made me swear to get it to you. Hawk took the bag carefully, held it like it was made of glass, like it was the most precious thing in the world, because in that moment it was. She knew, Sadie whispered. She knew they might come for her. She knew the risk, and she went anyway. She wanted justice for her grandson. Hawk's voice was thick. She wanted Danny to matter. At what cost? Nobody had an answer. The hospital was cold and bright, fluorescent lights that made everyone look sick. The smell of antiseptic and something underneath it that hospitals can never quite scrub away. Clara was in surgery. The doctors used words like internal bleeding and severe concussion and touch and go. They said it would be hours before they knew anything. Sadie sat in the waiting room, the bloody phone in her lap, Hawk beside her. Somewhere in this building, a 72-year-old woman was fighting for her life because she had loved her grandson enough to walk into a house where monsters were waiting. Hawk had already made copies of everything on the phone. Photos and texts sent to 3 different email addresses, backed up to a cloud account Boone set up. If something happened to the physical phone, the evidence would survive. This is my fault, Sadie said. Don't. If I hadn't gotten Clara involved, she involved herself. She made a choice. Hawk leaned forward. Clara Whitfield is 72 years old. She buried her grandson and watched his killers walk free for a year and a half. Nobody made her do anything. She saw a chance to fight back and she took it. And now she might die. She might, Hawk's voice was hard. Not cruel, just honest. And if she does, we make damn sure it means something. We take what she gave us and we burn Shane Prescott's world to the ground. Sadie looked down at the phone, at the cracked screen stained with an old woman's blood, at the evidence that had nearly cost a life to retrieve. Something crystallized inside her. Hard, bright, unbreakable. Not anger exactly, something deeper than anger. Conviction. I know what I need to do, she said. Hawk looked at her. Shane called me. 2 days ago after the garage, threatened me, said I had until sunrise to back off or everyone who helped me would become a target. He's panicking, Hawk said. Exactly. He's panicking, which means he's sloppy, which means if I give him what he wants, if I make him think I'm scared enough to meet with him, to negotiate, to hand over everything. Number Hawk's voice was a wall. Absolutely not. Listen to me. You are not putting yourself in front of that animal again. Not after what he did to Clara. Hawk, Sadie wheeled closer to him. Close enough that he couldn't look away. Close enough that he had to see her eyes and the fire burning in them. He's gonna run. You know it, I know it. If we wait for warrants, if we do everything by the book, he'll be gone before anyone can stop him. But if he thinks he's won, if he thinks I'm coming to him with my tail between my legs, he'll let his guard down, said a voice from behind them. They turned. A woman stood in the hospital corridor. Mid-40s, sharp features, dark hair pulled back tight, eyes that missed nothing and forgave less. She wore a suit that meant business and carried herself like someone who had spent years walking into rooms full of people who underestimated her and walking out having destroyed them. Lauren Cross, she said, District Attorney Sullivan County. Hawk called me 6 hours ago. I've been driving since. She looked at Sadie. You must be Sadie Dawson. I've been reading your research. Hawk emailed it from the car. And it's impressive. More than impressive. You built a case that my office has been trying to build for 3 years. In one night, with a laptop and a library card, I just connected dots. You did more than that. You found the thread that ties it all together. Lauren Cross sat down across from them. But connecting dots and convicting criminals are two different things. We need more. We need Shane on record. His own words, his own admissions. That's what I was just telling Hawk. Sadie said. I can get him to talk. He's scared. He's angry. He thinks I'm a helpless girl in a wheelchair who got lucky. If I call him, if I tell him I want to make a deal, hand over everything in exchange for being left alone. He'll say things he shouldn't, Lauren finished. Her eyes were calculating. It could work. Tennessee is a one-party consent state. If you agree to be recorded, everything he says is admissible. It's too dangerous, Hawk said. Everything is dangerous. Ooh, yes. Sadie met his gaze and didn't flinch. Clara almost died getting us that phone. My parents died because of these people. I am not going to hide while everyone else takes the risks. I can't do that. I won't. Hawk stared at her. She watched emotions move across his face like weather across a mountain. Fear, anger, frustration, and underneath all of it, something that looked like the pride a father feels watching his daughter become someone extraordinary. If we do this, he said slowly, we do it my way. You wear a wire. We have people in position before you're anywhere near him. State police, my crew, everyone. And the second things go sideways, we pull you out. No arguments. Agreed. I mean it, Sadie. If I say it's over, it's over. I understand. Lauren Cross stood up. I'll coordinate with the state police. I can have officers in position within 2 hours. She looked at Sadie with something that might have been admiration. You're either the bravest person I've ever met or the most reckless. Maybe both, Sadie said. The surgeon emerged before they left. His face was exhausted but not defeated. She's stable, he said. It was close, very close. But she's a fighter. She's asking for someone named Sadie. Sadie's heart seized. She's asking for me. She keeps saying the girl in the wheelchair. Hawk helped Sadie navigate to Clara's room. The old woman looked impossibly small in the hospital bed. Her face was swollen and bruised in shades of purple and yellow. Tubes ran from her arms. Machines beeped in steady rhythm. But her eyes were open, alert, alive. Sadie. Her voice was barely a whisper. Did you get it? Sadie rolled close and took Clara's hand. We got it. We got everything. Good. Clara's cracked lips curved into something like a smile. Then it was worth it. Clara, don't say that. Clara squeezed her hand with surprising strength. I knew the risks, made my choice. Just promise me one thing. Anything. Don't stop. No matter what they do, no matter who they hurt, don't stop until they pay for what they've done. For Danny, for all of them. I promise. Clara closed her eyes, exhausted, but peaceful in a way she hadn't been when she'd walked through Sadie's door hours ago. The peace of a woman who had finally done the things she'd been too afraid to do for 18 months. You're everything they hoped you'd become, sweetheart, Clara murmured. Sadie stayed until Clara fell asleep. Then she wheeled into the hallway where Hawk and Lauren were waiting. It's time, Sadie said. Let's end this. The drive to the old Millbrook barn took 20 minutes. Hawk drove. Sadie sat beside him, the wire taped beneath her shirt, her heart hammering so hard she could hear it over the engine. Remember, Hawk said, keep him talking. Get him to admit what he did to Clara. Get him to talk about the drugs, the deaths, anything. The more he says, the deeper he buries himself. And if he figures out I'm wearing a wire, he won't. But if he does, Hawk didn't answer. He didn't need to. They stopped a quarter-mile from the barn. Hawk helped Sadie into her chair. His hands were gentle, but his face was stone. I'll be close, he said. Every second. You see me move, you get out of the way. Understand? Sadie nodded. Her mouth was too dry for words. She wheeled herself down the gravel path. The sound of her wheels was loud in the evening quiet. Too loud, like a drum roll before an execution. The barn loomed ahead, its weathered boards silver in the fading light. A single car was parked outside. Shane's black SUV. He was waiting inside. Sadie stopped at the entrance. She took one breath, then another. She willed her hands to stop shaking. They didn't listen. She went in anyway. "You came alone." Shane's voice echoed from the shadows. Impressed honestly. "Thought for sure you'd bring your biker friends." "They don't know I'm here." The lie came easier than she expected. "I snuck out." Shane stepped into view. He looked different than he had in the alley. Rattled, his hair was uncombed, his eyes were red, his usual arrogance had cracks running through it, and something ugly and desperate showed through the gaps. Good, Sadie thought. Let him be desperate. So he crossed his arms. "You wanted to talk. Talk. I want this to end. I want to go back to my life. I'll give you everything I have. The documents, the research, all of it. Just leave me alone." Shane studied her. His eyes moved across her face, searching for the trap. "Why should I believe you? Because I'm tired." Sadie let her voice crack. "It wasn't entirely an act. I'm tired and I'm scared and I just want this to be over. Clara almost died. I don't want to be next." Clara should have minded her own business. Sadie's stomach turned, but she pressed forward. "Was it you? Did you hurt her?" Shane smiled, the smile of a man who enjoyed other people's pain the way most people enjoyed music. "What do you think? I think you're capable of it. I think you've done worse. You have no idea what I'm capable of." The pride in his voice was nauseating. He wanted her to know. He wanted her to be afraid. And he didn't realize that every word coming out of his mouth was being recorded. "Then tell me." Sadie wheeled closer. Her heart was a drum. Her blood was electric. "Tell me what you've done. If I'm going to destroy everything I've built, I want to know what I'm walking away from." "You want a confession?" Shane's eyes narrowed. "Nice try. I'm not wearing a wire. You can check." He considered it, then shook his head. "Doesn't matter. Nothing I say here means anything. Your word against mine. And guess whose uncle runs the sheriff's department? Your uncle's not going to be able to protect you much longer." The shift in Shane's face was immediate. The arrogance crumbled. Something raw and cornered took its place. "What's that supposed to mean?" "State police, they're building a case. They have witnesses. Evidence. It's only a matter of time. You're bluffing." "Am I?" Sadie held his gaze and did not blink. Clara had Danny's phone, the one with all the texts, all the pictures. "They have it now, Shane. They know everything." Color drained from his face. For 1 second, he looked like a scared boy standing in the ruins of a lie that had finally collapsed. Then the fear transformed. It twisted and darkened and became something far more dangerous. Rage. "You stupid little." He lunged. Sadie wheeled backward, but not fast enough. Shane grabbed her chair and tipped it sideways. She crashed to the ground. Pain exploded through her shoulder, the same shoulder that had hit the concrete in the alley days ago. She tasted dirt, tasted blood where she bitten her tongue. "You think you can threaten me?" Shane stood over her, his foot inches from her face. "You think you can come into my town and mess with my family?" He pulled something from his waistband. A gun, small, black, terrifying. "You should have taken my deal. Should have kept your mouth shut." "The police know I'm here," Sadie said. Her voice shook. She couldn't stop it, couldn't control the terror that flooded every cell of her body. "If I hurt you," Shane crouched down, pressed the barrel against her temple. The metal was cold. "Final, baby, I'm going to do a lot more than hurt you. And then I'm going to find every single person who helped you. That old biker, the state cop, that old woman in the hospital, all of them, and I'm going to make sure they never talk again. You can't kill everyone, Shane. Watch me." The barn door exploded inward. Hawk came through it like a force of nature, like something ancient and unstoppable that had been sleeping for years and had finally been woken up. He hit Shane from the side, sending the gun skittering across the floor into the darkness. The two men crashed to the ground. "Go," Hawk roared. "Get out, now." Sadie dragged herself toward her overturned wheelchair. Her arm screamed, her shoulder burned. Behind her, the sounds of the fight filled the barn. Impact, breaking wood, a grunt of pain that could have come from either man. She righted the chair, pulled herself into it. Her hands were slick with blood from a cut she didn't remember getting. More figures burst through the door. State police officers, weapons drawn, voices sharp with authority. Nobody move. Police. Shane was on the ground. Hawk's knee was in his back. His face was pressed into the dirt. Blood ran from a cut above his eye. "Get off me!" Shane screamed. "Do you know who I am?" "Yeah." Hawk's voice was cold and calm. "You're the guy who just confessed to assault, murder, and drug trafficking. On tape." What? Lauren Cross stepped into the barn. She held up a small device. "Every word, Mr. Prescott, every single word." "That's illegal. You can't." "Actually, we can. Tennessee is a one-party consent state for recordings." "Mrs. Dawson consented to being recorded." "You incriminated yourself. Game over." Officers hauled Shane to his feet. Handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists. He struggled and screamed and made threats that grew wilder and more desperate with every step toward the door. "This isn't over. My uncle will have all of you fired." "Funny you should mention your uncle." Lauren's voice was a blade. "We're picking him up right now, along with a dozen of your associates, the whole network, Shane. Every dealer, every distributor, every dirty cop who looked the other way. All of it. Coming down tonight." Shane's screams faded as they loaded him into the back of a cruiser. The sirens started. The lights spun red and blue against the old barn walls. And then it was quiet. Sadie sat in her wheelchair, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Hawk knelt beside her. "You okay, no?" She laughed, a strange broken sound. "I'm really not okay." He wrapped his arms around her. She collapsed into the embrace. He smelled like leather and engine oil and sweat, and something underneath all of it that felt like safety, like the way her father's jacket used to smell when he came home from work. "You did good," he murmured. "You did so good, Sadie. He was going to kill me." "I know, if you hadn't, but I did." Hawk pulled back, looked at her. His face was bruised. His knuckles were split, but his eyes were clear. "I wasn't going to let anything happen to you. Not while I'm still breathing." Lauren's phone rang. She answered, listened, then hung up with a look of deep satisfaction. "Sheriff Wade Prescott is in custody. Tried to run just like we predicted. State troopers caught him on Highway 70 with 2 suitcases full of cash and a fake passport." Something released in Sadie's chest, a pressure she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. "It's really over. The arrests are over," Lauren said. "The legal phase is just beginning. We'll need your testimony. Clara's. Anyone else willing to come forward?" "I'll testify. Whatever you need." But even as she said the words, a new thought was forming, a question that pressed against the back of her mind like a splinter she couldn't reach. "Lauren," Sadie's voice was quiet. "Careful. There's something else, something that doesn't add up. What Shane's been running drugs for years. His uncle's been covering it up. But someone was handling the money. Millions of dollars flowing through this operation for over a decade. Where did it go? Who laundered it?" Lauren went still. "That's a very good question. And I have another one." Sadie looked at Hawk, then back at Lauren. "The accident that killed my parents 2 years ago. My father was an accountant. If he was looking at the wrong set of books. If he found something he wasn't supposed to find." The silence that followed was the heaviest of the night. Lauren pulled out her phone. "I need to make some calls. Tonight. Right now." 3 hours later, Sadie sat in a conference room at the state police station. Lauren Cross stood at the head of the table. Her face was pale. Her voice was controlled in a way that told Sadie the news was very bad. "We found records in Wade Prescott's safe," Lauren said. "Financial records, transaction logs, and a file labeled with your father's name." Sadie stopped breathing. "The accident that killed your parents." "It wasn't an accident, Sadie. Your father discovered irregularities in a client's accounts that were being used to launder drug money. He was going to report it to the state attorney general. Wade Prescott found out. He ordered a hit 6 weeks before your parents died." The world tilted. Everything Sadie thought she knew about the worst night of her life shattered and reformed into something darker. Something monstrous. "The driver who hit us," she managed. "One of Prescott's dealers. The crash was staged to look like a drunk driving accident. The driver didn't survive, so he could never testify. The investigation was handled by Prescott's department. Classified as accidental within 48 hours. Sadie felt something break inside her. Not her heart. That had already been broken. Something deeper. The foundation she'd built her grief on. The story she'd told herself for 2 years, the story about random tragedy and meaningless loss. That story was a lie. Her parents hadn't died because of bad luck or a drunk driver, or the cruel indifference of the universe. They had been murdered. Murdered because her father tried to do the right thing. 2 years, Sadie said. Her voice sounded far away, like it was coming from the bottom of a well. I spent 2 years blaming myself, wondering if we'd left 5 minutes later, wondering if Dad had taken a different route, wondering why I survived when they didn't. And the whole time the people who killed them were walking free, living their lives, running their operation. Smiling at me in the grocery store, Hawk put his hand on her shoulder. She barely felt it. Not anymore, he said. Wade Prescott is going to spend the rest of his life in prison. Your parents are going to get justice. Sadie broke down. The tears came from a place so deep she didn't know it existed. She cried for her mother and her father and the life they should have had. She cried for the 2 years she'd wasted on grief that had been built on a lie. She cried for the girl she'd been in the back seat of that car reading a book by dome light, 30 seconds away from losing everything. Hawk held her, said nothing. Let her grieve. Let the wave come and do its work. When she could finally speak, Sadie wiped her face, straightened her shoulders, looked at Lauren Cross with eyes that were red and swollen and absolutely focused. I want to see him, she said. Lauren hesitated. Wade Prescott. I want to look him in the eye. He murdered my parents. He needs to know I'm the one who took him down. He needs to know their daughter survived. The county jail was cold, gray walls, gray floors, the smell of industrial cleaner that couldn't quite cover the smell of despair underneath. Sadie waited in an interrogation room, her wheelchair positioned directly across from an empty chair. The door opened. Wade Prescott shuffled in wearing an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs. He looked smaller than she'd expected, older, like the badge and the uniform had been holding him together all these years, and without them he was just a tired old man who had run out of road. He sat down, met her eyes. You're Dawson's girl. Yes. He shook his head slowly. Should have recognized you. Saw you around town a few times. Something familiar about your face. Couldn't place it. Would it have changed anything? No. His voice was flat, empty. Business is business. Business. Sadie let the words sit between them. You murdered my parents. You destroyed my life. You stole my legs and my family and 2 years of my life, and you call it business. You're young. You don't understand how the world works. Sometimes you do things to protect what's yours. Your legacy, Sadie said. She didn't blink. Your nephew is going to prison for the rest of his life. Your operation is destroyed. Everyone who worked for you is racing to make deals. This is your legacy, Sheriff. Something shifted in his eyes. I didn't want to kill your father, he said quietly. Jack was a good man. Stubborn like you, he could have looked the other way. Could have taken the money I offered and walked away. But he didn't. No, he didn't. Sadie leaned forward. Neither did I. And now you're going to spend the rest of your life in a cell knowing that Jack Dawson's daughter is the one who destroyed everything you built. Every time you close your eyes, you're going to see my face. Wade Prescott said nothing. For the first time since he'd sat down, he looked truly broken. Sadie turned her wheelchair toward the door. We're done here. She was almost through the door when his voice stopped her. Miss Dawson, who laundered the money. She didn't turn around, but she paused. Listened to the silence that followed his question. A silence that was not empty. A silence that was full of fear. He hadn't asked because he was curious. He'd asked because someone else was still out there. Someone he was afraid of. Someone above him in a chain she hadn't finished tracing. I'll find out, Sadie said. Then she wheeled out of the room and didn't look back. In the hallway, Hawk was waiting. He searched her face. How do you feel? Sadie thought about it. The rage was still there, the grief was still raw, but something new had taken root beside them. Something sharp and focused and patient. I feel like we're not done yet, she said. Wade was scared when I asked about the money, not scared of prison, scared of someone. You think there's someone else? I know there is. Sadie looked up at Hawk with her father's eyes, and I'm going to find them. Clara woke up on a Tuesday. Sadie was there when it happened. She'd been there every morning for 4 days straight, wheeling herself into the ICU at 7, sitting beside the bed holding the old woman's hand, talking to her about nothing and everything, about the weather, about the books that had come in at the library, about Danny's phone and the evidence it held, and the arrest that had shaken Riverside to its foundation. On the third night, a security alarm had gone off in Clara's wing. A nurse found the door to Clara's room ajar, a pillow on the floor, and Clara gasping for air, her face dark with fresh bruising. Someone had gotten past the front desk using stolen maintenance credentials. By the time security reviewed the footage, the man was gone. But Clara had survived. Again. And Sadie had refused to leave her side since. Clara had been in and out of consciousness. Moments of clarity swallowed by hours of drug sleep. The doctors said her body was healing. The broken ribs were knitting. The internal bleeding had stopped. The swelling in her brain was going down. But they couldn't say when she'd truly come back. If she'd truly come back. Then on Tuesday morning, Clara opened her eyes and they were clear. Sadie. Clara's voice was a whisper, thin as paper, but her eyes were sharp, focused, present. I'm here, Clara. I'm right here, the man who hurt me. Clara's hand tightened on Sadie's. I saw his face. Sadie leaned closer. Her heart was suddenly loud in her ears. Who was it? Did you recognize him? Clara's breathing was labored. Every word cost her something. But she pushed through it with the same iron will that had carried her into that house to get Danny's phone. He was wearing a maintenance uniform. But I knew him. I'd seen him before. Months ago, before Danny died. He was with Shane at a restaurant on the east side. They were having dinner together, laughing like friends. Sadie waited. The machines beeped their steady rhythm. The fluorescent lights hummed above. His name, Clara said. I remember now. I saw it on a business card Danny had in his wallet. The card was in the box with his things, the box I kept under my bed. Clara. Who was it, Russell Keene? The name landed in Sadie's chest like a bullet. Russell Keene, her father's business partner. The man who had sat across from Jack Dawson at a shared desk for 15 years. The man who had come to the funeral in a black suit with tears on his face. The man who had held Sadie's hand and told her he would always be there for her. Who had sent flowers on the anniversary of the accident every year since. Who had taught her to play chess when she was 12 years old, sitting on his back porch on summer evenings while her parents drank lemonade and laughed. That's impossible, Sadie heard herself say. The words came from somewhere far away, from the version of herself that still believed the world made sense. Russell was my father's best friend. He was at our house every Christmas. Clara's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry, but I know what I saw. I know his face, and when he came into my hospital room, when he put that pillow over my face, he whispered something. He said, tell Danny I'm sorry. Sadie couldn't breathe. The room shrank. The walls pressed in. The beeping of the machines became distant, muffled, like she was hearing them from underwater. Russell Keene had laundered the money. Russell Keene had sat beside her father for 15 years and smiled and shook his hand and gone home at night, knowing that the numbers he was hiding would eventually get his partner killed. Russell Keene had watched Sadie's parents lowered into the ground and cried real tears, and those tears meant nothing, because the man who wept was the same man who had made their deaths possible. Sadie released Clara's hand, slowly, carefully, like setting down something fragile before her shaking hands could break it. I need to call Hawk, she said. Her voice was flat, controlled. The voice that follows screaming and crying when all that's left is the work. Hawk arrived in 20 minutes. Lauren Cross arrived in 30. They listened to Clara's account. They checked the hospital security footage. And there he was, Russell Keene, captured on camera at 6:04 a.m. walking through a service entrance in a stolen maintenance uniform badge, clipped into his chest, face turned away from the camera, but not far enough. Not far enough. His house is empty, Lauren said, closing her phone. Office cleared out. Car gone. He's running, No Sadie said. Everyone looked at her. He's not running. Think about it. If Russell wanted to run, he would have disappeared the night Shane and Wade were arrested. He had a head start. He had money. He had connections. But instead of running, he came here. To this hospital. To Clara's room. To finish what Shane started. Sadie wheeled to the window, looked out at the parking lot below. Her mind was working the way her father's mind had worked, the way an accountant's mind works, following the numbers, following the logic, finding the pattern in what looked like chaos. He attacked Clara because she recognized him. But that's not the only reason. He's not cleaning up loose ends randomly. He's buying time. Time for what Hawk asked, the money. Sadie turned back to face them. 15 years of drug profits flowing through this town. Millions of dollars. Shane sold the product. Wade provided cover. But someone had to wash the money. Someone had to make it disappear into legitimate accounts and shell companies and investments that looked clean on paper. That was Russell's job. That's what my father found. That's why my father died. Lauren was already taking notes. Her pen moved fast across the legal pad. Wade Prescott had cash and a fake passport. Sadie continued. He was ready to run with whatever he could carry. But the real money, the bulk of it, is still out there, hidden in accounts that only Russell knows how to access. He's not running because he's not done moving it. He needs time to transfer funds, close accounts, erase the trail, and he'll hurt anyone who gets in his way. The room was quiet. Hawk leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching Sadie with an expression she'd seen before but couldn't quite name. How do we find him, Lauren asked. Sadie had been thinking about that too, thinking about it since Clara spoke his name, thinking about it with the part of her brain that her father had given her, the part that saw numbers the way other people saw colors. Russell is an accountant, Sadie said. Everything he does is methodical, planned. He doesn't improvise. So where would he go? Not a hotel, too traceable. Not a friend's house. He can't trust anyone right now. He needs somewhere private. Somewhere he knows is empty. Somewhere connected to him, but not in an obvious way. She paused. A memory surfaced, sharp, painful, and useful. My parents had a cabin, Lake Whitmore, 2 hours north. My father built it the summer before I was born. Russell helped him. Spent weekends up there hammering nails and laying floorboards. He knows the property as well as anyone, and it's been sitting empty since the accident. Nobody goes there. Nobody thinks about it. You think he'd go somewhere connected to your family? Lauren asked. After what he did, Sadie's voice hardened. I think Russell Keene has a sick sense of irony. He helped kill my parents and then cried at their funeral. Using their cabin as a hideout is exactly what he'd do. But even as she spoke about Russell, something else was nagging at her. A loose thread she couldn't quite grasp. Russell was the money man. The accountant. The one who moved numbers from one column to another and made dirty cash look clean. But was he the architect? Was he the one at the top? Wade Prescott had been afraid when Sadie asked about the money. Not afraid of prison, afraid of someone. And Russell Keene, for all his betrayal, was a follower, a functionary, a man who managed spreadsheets, not empires. There was someone else, someone above them all. Sadie's phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, almost let it go to voicemail. But something, instinct maybe, or the same gravity that had pulled her to that library window made her pick up. Sadie Dawson. The voice was female, middle-aged, worn thin by grief and sleepless nights. Who is this? My name is Patricia Webb, Marcus's mother. Marcus Webb Jr., 19 years old. Scholarship to the State University, engineering student, found dead in his apartment. Overdose. Case closed. Mrs. Webb, I'm so sorry about your son. Thank you. A pause. The sound of a woman gathering courage. I'm calling because I need to tell you something. Something about Marcus. Something I've never told anyone. Sadie gripped the phone tighter. What is it? Marcus kept a journal. I found it after he died. Hidden in his room behind a loose board in his closet. He wrote about everything, the parties, the drugs, the people who supplied them. He knew he was in over his head. He was trying to document it, trying to build a record in case something happened to him. Patricia's voice shook. He wrote about a woman who was there the night he died, a woman who gave him those pills, not Shane, not any of Shane's boys. A woman. Sadie's blood went cold. Who? That's the thing. He didn't know her real name, but he described her, blonde hair, mid-30s, drove a red convertible. He said she called herself Angel. Something about that description snagged in Sadie's memory, something she'd seen, somewhere she'd been. Did Marcus say anything else about this woman? Just one thing. Patricia's voice dropped to barely a whisper. He said she wasn't just a dealer. He said she was running the whole thing. Shane, Wade, all of them. They answered to her. Sadie closed her eyes. There it was, the missing piece, the thread she'd been reaching for. Mrs. Webb, does your son's journal describe anything else about this woman, where she went, who she was connected to? He mentioned a charity, a foundation. Said she recruited kids at community events. Made it seem like she was helping them, giving them scholarships, jobs, a future. But it was a pipeline. She'd get them hooked first. Then she'd turn them into dealers. Marcus said she called it building the family. Sadie felt sick, physically, viscerally sick. Mrs. Webb, I need that journal. Can you bring it to the district attorney's office? I'll bring it today. Right now. I've been carrying this for too long. My boy deserved better than silence. The line went dead. Sadie sat with the phone in her lap, her mind racing at a speed that frightened her. A woman, blonde, red convertible, called herself Angel, running the entire operation from behind a charity. She opened her laptop. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with the precision of a woman who had spent 2 years organizing information for a living. She searched for charities in Riverside, foundations, nonprofits, community organizations. It took her 11 minutes. Riverside Hope Foundation, helping families rebuild. The logo was a pair of golden wings. Sadie stared at the screen. She'd seen that logo before. On a banner at the library's summer reading program. On flyers at the community center. On the side of a van that delivered food to the homeless shelter on Thanksgiving. She clicked through to the leadership page. Founder and executive director, Victoria Vivian Mercer. The photograph showed a blonde woman in her mid-30s, polished, professional, beautiful in the way that expensive things are beautiful. She was smiling, the smile of a woman who had mastered the art of looking generous, of looking kind, of looking like exactly the sort of person you would trust with your children. Sadie's hands trembled. She searched the name, Vivian Mercer. And there it was, the connection that tied everything together. Vivian Mercer, wife of Martin Mercer, defense attorney, the same Martin Mercer who had been hired to represent Shane Prescott, the same Martin Mercer whose legal team had filed motions to suppress the barn recording, the same Martin Mercer who had been in that courtroom fighting to set free the people who worked for his wife. Hawk. Sadie's voice was barely controlled. Come look at this. Hawk crossed the room. Read the screen. His face changed the way a sky changes before a tornado, slowly at first, then all at once. Her husband is Shane's lawyer, Hawk said. He's not just his lawyer. Sadie's voice was steady now, cold and clear as lake water in January. He's protecting his wife's operation. Shane Wade Russell, they're all employees, the real boss, the one at the top, the one Wade was afraid of. It's her. It's been her the whole time. Hiding in plain sight, Hawk said, running a drug empire from behind a charity that helps children. Sadie felt something dark and heavy settle into her bones. She's been recruiting kids, getting them addicted, turning them into dealers. And when they outlive their usefulness, or when they start asking questions, they end up like Marcus Webb and Danny Whitfield. Hawk's jaw was a line of granite. We need to tell Lauren. We need proof first. Sadie closed the laptop. If we go after Vivian Mercer without evidence that will hold up in court, her husband will tear us apart. He's already trying to get Shane's recording thrown out. Imagine what he'll do to protect his wife. The journal. Sadie nodded. Patricia Webb is bringing it today. If Marcus documented what his mother says, he documented names, dates, descriptions, combined with Danny's phone and everything I've already compiled, will have enough. But we need to move fast. The second Vivian realizes we're looking at her, she'll disappear. And she has the resources to disappear completely. Patricia Webb arrived at Lauren Cross's office at noon. She was a small woman with graying hair and the hollowed-out look of someone who had been mourning so long it had become part of her body. She clutched a worn leather journal to her chest like it was the last piece of her son still alive in the world. This is everything Marcus wrote, she said, placing it on the table. The last 6 months of his life. Lauren opened the journal carefully. Sadie watched her face as she read, watched the color drain from it, Watched the horror dawn in her eyes like a sun rising on a battlefield. My God, Lauren breathed. It's everything, Patricia said. Names, dates, dollar amounts. Everything Vivian Mercer did, documented by my son in his own handwriting. Why didn't you come forward before Patricia's voice cracked? Because I didn't understand what I was reading. I thought Marcus was writing fiction, making up stories for a class or something. I couldn't believe that people I knew, people I'd seen at church and school events, were capable of this. She wiped her eyes. She targeted children, Lauren. Vivian Mercer stood at those community events and smiled and shook hands and gave out scholarships. And then she fed their children poison. She fed my child poison. This is enough, Lauren said. She closed the journal. Her eyes were hard. Her voice was harder. This is more than enough. What happens now? We move today. Before she has any warning, Lauren reached for her phone. State police, FBI, everyone we can mobilize simultaneously. And Russell Keene Sadie answered before Lauren could. I know where he is. My parents' cabin. Lake Whitmore. Hawk was already standing. I'll take a team to the cabin. Lauren, you handle Vivian Mercer. No, Sadie's voice stopped everyone. We do the cabin first. Russell is the accountant. He knows where every dollar is hidden, every account, every shell company. If we arrest Vivian first and Russell hears about it, he'll destroy the financial records. And without the money trail, half the case falls apart. Lauren looked at her for a long moment. You should have been a prosecutor, she said. Ask me again in 3 years. The drive to Lake Whitmore took 2 hours. Hawk drove. Boone and Tex followed in a second vehicle. State police trailed at a distance close enough to respond far enough to not spook anyone watching the roads. Sadie sat in the passenger seat and watched the landscape change. Town giving way to farmland. Farmland giving way to forest. The road narrowing until it was barely 2 lanes winding through hills that her father had loved. Hills where he'd taken her share hiking when she was small, before the wheelchair, before everything. You okay? Hawk asked quietly. I haven't been back here since the accident. Sadie's throat tightened. I couldn't face it. All the memories. My dad teaching me to fish off the dock. My mom reading on the porch in the evenings. It was the happiest place I knew. We don't have to do this. I can go alone. No, Sadie straightened in her seat. I've been running from the past for 2 years, hiding from it, letting it control me. That ends today. All of it. The cabin came into view as they rounded the final bend, small, wooden, nestled among pines at the edge of the lake. The kind of place that exists in memory as bigger and brighter than it really is. The dock her father built still jutted out over the water, weathered but standing, and parked in front, half hidden by brush, a black sedan. Russell Keene was here. Hawk killed the engine. Turned to Sadie. Stay in the truck until we secure the area. Hawk, I mean it. Let us go in first. Sadie wanted to argue, wanted to be the one to face Russell, to look him in the eye and let him see Jack Dawson's daughter standing in the doorway of Jack Dawson's cabin. But she saw the look on Hawk's face, the look that said this was not a negotiation. She nodded. Hawk, Boone, and Tex approached the cabin, weapons drawn, moving with the silent coordination of men who had done this before in another life for different reasons. The door opened before they reached it. Russell Keene stepped onto the porch, hands raised. He was smaller than Sadie remembered, thinner. His hair had gone from gray to white in the weeks since the arrests. His wire-rimmed glasses sat crooked on his nose. He looked like an accountant. He looked like a man who balanced books and paid his taxes on time and went to bed early. He looked harmless. Sadie knew better. I was wondering when you'd figure it out, Russell called across the yard. His voice was calm, too calm, the voice of a man who had prepared for this moment. Took you long enough. Russell Keene, you're under arrest. Hawk's voice carried no emotion. Get on your knees, hands behind your head. There's no need for dramatics. Russell smiled, a thin, cold expression that had no warmth in it. No life. I'm not going to run. I've been waiting for you. In fact, I have information you're going to want. About the money, about the entire operation. About things Roy Prescott never even knew. Information you're willing to trade, Hawk said. I'm a practical man. Russell lowered his hand slightly. I know how this works. Immunity, protection, a new identity. In exchange, I give you everything. every account, every transaction. $23 million dollars hidden across 6 countries. Without me, that money disappears forever. You tried to kill Clara Whitfield, Sadie called from the truck. She couldn't stay silent anymore. Couldn't sit in the passenger seat and listen to this man bargain for his freedom. Russell's eyes found her through the windshield. Something shifted in his face. A flicker. Regret, maybe. Or the performance of regret. Clara was a complication. Regrettable but necessary. She recognized me. I couldn't take the risk. And Jack Dawson Hawk's voice was a blade. Was he a complication too? Russell's smile faded. Sadie opened the truck door, wheeled herself down the ramp Hawk had installed, moved across the gravel toward the cabin, toward the man who had destroyed her family while sitting at her father's dinner table. Hawk stepped aside. He didn't want to. She could see it in his face, but he stepped aside because he understood that this moment belonged to her. You were at their funeral, Sadie's voice shook. Not with fear, with something far more dangerous. You stood there in your black suit and you cried. You told me you'd always be there for me. You sent flowers every year on the anniversary. You looked me in the eye and told me how sorry you were. Sadie, Russell's composure cracked. Just a fracture. But enough, I didn't expect. You killed them. She was close now, close enough to see the sweat on his forehead, close enough to see the capillaries in his eyes, close enough to see the man behind the mask. You killed my parents, and then you came to their funeral and pretended to grieve. What kind of person does that? I didn't kill anyone. Russell's voice hardened, a wall going up. I moved money. That's all. What Wade did with the information I gave him, that was his decision. You knew what would happen. You knew. And you did it anyway. Your father was going to ruin everything. The wall cracked again. 15 years of work, millions of dollars, and Jack was going to throw it all away because he couldn't look the other way like everyone else. He was a good man. He was a fool. Russell stepped closer. Hawk tensed but didn't move. A fool who thought right and wrong were simple, who thought he could expose the truth and walk away clean. The world doesn't work like that, Sadie. There are always consequences. Yeah, Sadie's voice was ice. There are. She pulled her phone from her pocket. Press stop on the recording app. Lauren, she said, did you get all that? Russell's face went white. The blood drained from it so fast he looked like a man watching his own death. What I've been recording since I got out of the truck. Every word, every admission, every excuse. That's not. You can't. Tennessee is a one-party consent state, Sadie said. Remember your friend Martin Mercer tried to use that argument to suppress the barn recording. Funny how things come back around. Russell lunged. Hawk was faster. He tackled the accountant to the ground, pinned him face first in the dirt. Keene's glasses flew off and landed in the gravel. Without them, his eyes were small and desperate and afraid. Boone and Tex secured his hands while state troopers moved in from the tree line. It won't matter, Russell gasped into the dirt. I know too much. They'll never let me testify. You think Wade Prescott was the top of the chain? He's nothing. There are people above him, people who will never let this come to trial. Let them try, Sadie said. She leaned forward in her chair. Her father's eyes, her father's awe, her father's refusal to look away. I've already taken down your operation. I've already put your friends in jail. And I'm going to do the same to everyone else connected to this. Every dirty cop, every corrupt politician, every person who helped cover up my parents' murder. I will find them all. Russell twisted his head to look at her. Real fear in his eyes now. Not the calculated fear of a man playing an angle. The raw animal fear of a man who realizes the walls are closing in and there is no door. You're just a girl in a wheelchair. Yes, Sadie said, I am. And I just destroyed your entire world. They loaded Russell into the back of a state police cruiser. Sadie watched until the car disappeared down the mountain road. Then she turned her chair toward the cabin. The door was still open. She wheeled herself up the ramp that her father had built 25 years ago before she was born, before any of this was imaginable. The cabin smelled like dust and pine and old wood and something underneath all of it that might have been memory. Or maybe it was just the ghost of a life that had been lived here and loved here and lost. Her mother's reading chair sat by the window, a faded blue cushion still holding the shape of the woman who used to curl up in it with a book and a cup of tea on summer evenings. Her father's fishing rod hung on the wall beside a tackle box that still had his initials scratched into the lid with a pocket knife. The kitchen counter where her mother had made pancakes every Saturday morning was covered in a thin layer of dust. The wooden floor her father and Russell had laid together board by board, weekend by weekend, creaked under Sadie's wheels like the house was speaking to her, like it recognized her, like it had been waiting. A photograph on the mantel showed the three of them standing on the dock. Sadie was maybe 5 years old. Her father held her on his hip. Her mother leaned against his shoulder, all of them squinting into the sun, all of them smiling the way people smile when they don't know yet what the future holds, when they still believe the good things will last. Sadie sat in front of that photograph for a long time. She didn't cry. She was beyond tears now, beyond grief almost. She was in that place on the other side of breaking where everything is very quiet and very clear. Then she picked up her phone and called Lauren Cross. Russell's in custody. You can move on, Vivian Mercer. The arrest of Vivian Mercer happened 2 hours later. Lauren called afterward with the details. State police and FBI agents had surrounded the Mercer home, a white colonial with a manicured lawn and window boxes full of flowers. The kind of house that appeared in magazines. The kind of house that hid the worst kind of monster. Vivian had come to the door in a silk robe, coffee cup in hand, smiling. Can I help you, officers? She maintained her composure through the reading of the charges. Drug trafficking, money laundering, conspiracy to commit murder, corruption of minors. She maintained it when they showed her the journal. She maintained it when they told her about the recordings. She broke when they told her that Russell Keene had given them everything. Every account, every transaction, every name. Vivian Mercer was denied bail. Her husband Martin recused himself from all related cases. Within a week, he was under investigation himself. The trials began 3 months later. Shane Prescott went first. He sat at the defense table looking smaller than Sadie remembered. Stripped of his swagger, his arrogance, his uncle's protection. He looked like what he was, a scared man in a suit that didn't fit facing the consequences of a lifetime of cruelty. Sadie testified for 4 hours. She sat in the witness box, her wheelchair positioned so that every juror could see her face, and she told them everything. She told them about the alley, about Shane's hand on her face and the cold in his fingers, and the way he'd thrown her wheelchair like it was garbage. About the threats, about the slashed tires and the note in block letters and the broken window screen and the figure standing in the parking lot at 3 a.m. She told them about Clara, about a 72-year-old retired nurse who walked into her own home knowing there might be someone waiting inside because justice for her grandson mattered more than her own safety. She told them about Danny Whitfield and Marcus Webb and Jennifer Crane. She said their names slowly, clearly, so the courtroom would remember them, so the record would hold them. She told them about her parents, about a car accident that wasn't an accident, about a father who found the truth in a set of numbers and died for it, about a mother who never knew what was coming. Her voice didn't break. Not once. Not during the 4 hours of testimony. Not during the cross-examination that followed. The defense attorney tried to rattle her, tried to paint her as unstable, obsessed, unreliable, a young woman in a wheelchair with a grudge against prominent citizens. Sadie met every question with steady eyes and clear answers. You expect this jury to believe the attorney said that a young woman in a wheelchair single-handedly dismantled a criminal organization that operated for 15 years. I didn't do it single-handedly, Sadie said. Her voice filled the courtroom. I had help from people who believed the truth mattered more than their own safety. That's what Shane Prescott and his family never understood. They thought they could terrorize everyone into silence. They were wrong. Shane was convicted on all counts. 45 years without parole. Wade Prescott received life. Russell Keene got 30 years. He wept when the judge read the sentence. Sadie watched his tears and felt nothing at all. Vivian Mercer's trial was the longest. She had money, connections, the best lawyers her family could afford. She sat in the courtroom every day in tailored clothes and careful makeup, looking like a woman who had been wrongly accused, looking like a philanthropist, a pillar of the community, a mother and wife who couldn't possibly have done the things they said she'd done. She maintained her innocence until the last day. But Danny's phone records were irrefutable. Text messages, photographs, transaction details, all pointing to the woman who called herself Angel. Marcus Webb's journal was damning. Two young men dead now who had documented the truth in different ways because they knew on some level that the truth might be all they had left to give. The financial records Russell had surrendered mapped every dollar from its dirty origin to its clean destination. Every charity event that doubled as a recruitment drive. Every scholarship fund that funneled money to offshore accounts. Every community dinner where Vivian Mercer smiled for the cameras while her operation destroyed families. And one by one, the people who had worked for her took the stand and pointed their fingers at the woman in the silk blouse who had called herself Angel. Vivian Mercer was convicted on all counts. Life in prison plus 50 years. The judge called her operation one of the most insidious criminal enterprises in the state's history because it preyed upon the most vulnerable members of the community, its children. After the final verdict, Sadie wheeled herself out of the courthouse into the sharp autumn sunlight. The steps were lined with people, not just reporters, families, the Webbs, the Cranes, Clara's neighbors, people she'd never met who had driven from across the county to be here when the last gavel fell. Cameras flashed, reporters pushed forward, microphones thrust toward her face, questions shouted from every direction. Sadie, how do you feel about the verdict? Do you consider yourself a hero? What's next for you? Hawk stepped forward, ready to block them. But Sadie stopped him. Wait. She turned to face the cameras, took a breath. I'm not a hero, she said. I'm just someone who saw something wrong and refused to look away. There are people like me everywhere. People who are scared, people who think they're powerless, people who believe their voices don't matter. I'm here to tell them they're wrong, she paused. 2 years ago, I lost my parents and my ability to walk in the same night. I thought my life was over. Then I saw three men threatening a girl in an alley, and I had a choice. Stay silent or speak up. I chose to speak up. It cost me everything. It almost cost me my life. But it gave me something I never expected. What was that? A reporter called out. Family. Sadie's voice cracked. I found people who believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. People who risked everything to stand beside me. I'm here today because of them. She looked at Hawk, at Clara, who sat in her own wheelchair near the courthouse steps, her face still carrying the bruises that were finally fading. At Mama D and the bikers gathered around them. At Lauren Cross, who stood apart, professional and composed but smiling. If there's one thing I want people to take from this, it's that you don't have to be perfect to make a difference. You don't have to be strong or rich or powerful. You just have to be willing to try. And you have to find your people. The ones who will stand beside you when everything goes wrong. She turned her chair and wheeled down the ramp. The questions continued behind her as she didn't look back. They drove to the cemetery that afternoon. All of them. Sadie, Hawk, Clara, Mama D, and Boone, and Tex, and Wrench, and Dalton, and Jolene, the whole family. Mama D brought wildflowers she'd picked from the roadside. Boone brought a bottle of bourbon and poured it out slowly onto the grass beside the headstones. To Jack and Ellen Dawson, he said, two of the bravest people I never met. Sadie sat before her parents' graves. The sun was setting. The sky had turned the color of honey and amber and old gold. A sky her mother would have photographed and her father would have watched in silence, as if the colors were saying something only he could hear. I did it, Sadie whispered to the headstones. I finished what you started. The people who hurt you are going to prison forever. Riverside is safe again. Her voice broke. And I found a family. People who loved me. People who stood up for me when I couldn't stand up for myself. You would have liked them, Dad, especially Hawk. He told me you were the smartest man he ever knew. He told me you used to say I was going to change the world. The wind moved through the trees, gentle, warm, like a hand on her shoulder. I love you, she said. Both of you. I'll always love you. And I'll make sure the world remembers what you did. Hawk appeared beside her. He held a small wooden box worn smooth with age. He set it in her lap without a word. Sadie opened it. Inside was a photograph. Two young men standing side by side, arms thrown around each other's shoulders, grinning at the camera with the reckless joy of people who have their whole lives ahead of them. One of them was Hawk, younger, thinner, no gray in his beard. The other was her father, Jack Dawson, 20 years old maybe, his eyes bright, his smile wide, looking like a man who believed the future was going to be good. "I found it in my storage unit," Hawk said. His voice was rougher than usual. "Thought you should have it." Sadie stared at the photo, at her father's face, frozen in a moment of happiness she'd never known about. "He looked so young," she whispered. "He was. We both were. That was taken right before he met your mother. He was talking about going straight, getting a real job, building something that mattered." Hawk cleared his throat. "I told him he was crazy." "Know what he said?" "What he said, Hawk, someday I'm going to have a family, and I'm going to make sure they're proud of me. Whatever it takes." Sadie pressed the photograph to her chest, held it there against her heart. "He did," she said. "He made us so proud." Clara's hand found hers. Mama D's arm wrapped around her shoulders. The bikers stood in a loose circle around them, silent, steady, a wall of leather and loyalty and the kind of love that doesn't announce itself but never leaves. "And you honor him," Clara said softly. "Every single day." They stayed until the stars came out, saying goodbye and hello at the same time. Goodbye to the grief that had defined Sadie for 2 years. Hello to whatever came next. 3 weeks later, Lauren Cross called. "I have a proposition for you," she said. "Have you ever considered law school?" Sadie laughed. "You're the second person to ask me that. Then maybe you should listen. You have a gift, Sadie, for research, for investigation, for seeing patterns that other people miss. You'd make a formidable prosecutor, or a victim's advocate, someone who fights for people who can't fight for themselves." Sadie looked around her apartment, at the stacks of case files she hadn't been able to put down, at the notes she'd continued making even after the trials ended, at the letter she'd written to Danny Whitfield and left at his grave promising him that his death would not be meaningless. "I'll think about it," she said. She thought about it for one night. The next morning she called Lauren back. "I'm in." Hawk found her on her porch that evening filling out the application. "Good news or bad news?" he asked. "I'm applying to law school." His face split into a rare, genuine smile, the kind that transformed him completely, that turned the mountain of leather and scars into something almost gentle. "Your dad would be doing backflips right now. I'm scared," Sadie admitted. "What if I can't do it?" "What if I fail? Then you fail trying." Hawk sat down beside her. "You've faced down killers, survived attacks, testified in court, brought down the most powerful criminals in this county. You think law books are going to beat you? Law books don't pull guns on you." "No, but finals week comes close." He laughed at his own joke. Then he grew quiet. "You're going to be fine, better than fine. You're going to be great." "How do you know?" "Because you're Jack Dawson's daughter, and Ellen's, the two bravest people I ever knew." Hawk put his arm around her shoulders. "That kind of courage doesn't disappear. It grows, it multiplies, it changes the world." Sadie leaned into his embrace. "I couldn't have done any of this without you," she said. "Sure you could have." "No," Sadie looked up at him. "I mean it, Hawk. You saved my life in more ways than one." His eyes glistened. "You saved mine too, Sadie. You reminded me what it means to fight for something that matters. You gave me a second chance at being the man I should have been." "So we saved each other." "Yeah." Hawk smiled. "I guess we did." That night, Sadie sat alone in her apartment, the photograph of her father and Hawk on the table beside her. The law school application completed and sealed in an envelope. The leather jacket Mama D and Jolene had given her, hanging on the back of her door Hell's Angels style, with a custom patch stitched over the heart that read Sadie's Angels. Outside, the lights of Riverside flickered in the darkness. Ordinary and beautiful. A town that had nearly been destroyed by the people who were supposed to protect it. A town that had been saved by the people nobody expected. A town that would wake up tomorrow and go about its business. Most of its residents never fully understanding how close they'd come to losing everything or who had fought to save it. But some of them knew. The families who had lost children, the grandmother who had walked into a house full of danger, the bikers who had come when they were called, they knew, and they would remember. A retired biker who couldn't forgive himself, a retired nurse who refused to stay silent, a group of outlaws who still believed in loyalty, a district attorney who never stopped fighting. and a girl in a wheelchair who saw something through a window and refused to look away. Sadie picked up a pen. On the back of the envelope, she wrote 3 words, for Mom and Dad. Then she set it on the table and sat in the quiet of her apartment and let herself feel everything. The grief and the rage and the hope and the love and the terrible, beautiful weight of being alive when so many people weren't. Tomorrow she would mail the application. Tomorrow she would start building the next chapter. Tomorrow the work would begin again because there was always more work, more cases, more people who needed someone in their corner, more voices that needed to be heard. But tonight, Sadie Dawson simply breathed. She had survived the worst thing that could happen to a person. She had lost everything and found something she never expected. She had been broken and broken again, and remade again, and every time she came back stronger. Not because she was special, not because she was brave in some extraordinary way, because she refused to give up, because she found her people, because she rose, not in spite of what happened to her, but because of it. Not alone, but surrounded by family. Not as a victim, but as a warrior. Some people wait their whole lives to find their purpose. Sadie Dawson found hers at her lowest moment, lying on the ground in a filthy alley, unable to move, surrounded by enemies. And she rose.